Hey guys, welcome back to Such Plants. My name is Ron, and today we are going to be taking a look at my air propagation progress on this Monstera Albo. So I started air layering this plant about 3 to 4 weeks ago, and the reason why I started to do that was because at one point I thought the plant was dying because the lower leaves here started yellowing at the very tips, and I suspected right off the bat and decided to pull the plant out of its pot to check up on the roots. And what I found was there was no root rot at all. And because this plant doesn't have any bugs, uh, I then assumed that it was because of shock. So before this room, this plant was living mostly under a grow light. And despite that, it's been able to push out leaves with fenestrations, as you can see, the top two newest growth up here. Because usually if your plant is under, well, in my case, I don't know how strong my grow lights are, but I have other Monstera deliciosas that are barely pushing out any fenestrations. I probably need to put 2 times the amount of grow lights. But now that my plants are in this room where there's more sunlight, I should be okay. And by moving the plant from a less than ideal situation to a more ideal situation in terms of sunlight, I think that's what shocked this plant. And so the tips started to turn yellow as a result. But as you can see, there's these two things that are just hanging off the stem. These are where I made the air layering propagations. So I've never air layered a plant before, but essentially what that is it's basically another method of propagation. Instead of chopping and propping and putting the cuttings into water, just like I've done here with this Monstera deliciosa, I've made a video on that, so you can check it out. You totally will skip this step, the water step. And before cutting, you'll actually start the rooting process directly on the plant stem. So the only time you'll need to cut the stem is when the aerial root develops roots that are mature enough to sustain the cutting. So it's been about 3 to 4 weeks now, and these aerial roots grew by about 2 inches or so. But for today, we're just going to be examining the progress. And the aerial roots in these little saran wrap contraptions that I made are starting to grow out and into the saran wrap. So I need to replace it with something else because I'll probably give it another 1 or 2 inches before I do the actual cutting. But also at the same time, the new growth up here is still hardening. I don't want to chop it before it hardens because otherwise it'll just stay limp for a long time. So I would say maybe in 2 weeks I will cut it after this hardens. I don't know, I'm kind of nervous because I'm looking at it right here and I don't know if I like what I see so far. But let's get to it. So here's a closer look at the original leaf that this plant grew out of. It has browning at the tips, which is normal for any original leaf. I'm actually surprised that it's been hanging on to the plant for this long already. Usually this would start to yellow and brown quicker and then just fall off. Or sometimes people would just cut it off because this is barely providing any nutrients for the plant because you have all of these other leaves. But I'm gonna keep it on until, I don't know, until it just falls off, I guess. Here we have 4 leaves and their nodes below this air layer. This aerial root is attached to this leaf, and then above that we have another aerial root attached to this leaf, and then above this we have the top 3 newest leaves. If I swing this around, you can see that the very tips of these bottom 3 or 4 leaves turned yellow, and that was over the course of a week that it had done so. And then this leaf right here with white on the tip also eventually developed browning. So that was kind of scary, hence me propagating this plant. I also didn't want to do the normal propagation method in cutting and then putting it into water, just so that putting it in water is risky because sometimes bacterial growth will happen quickly, and once your aerial root goes bad, it'll take the leaf down with it, and that's basically your only chance of growing a new plant is the aerial root and the node. As you can see, the top newest growth is gorgeous. There is solid white variegation with the fenestration happening in the white, and then the other leaves are equally as beautiful, but I just love the solid white variegation that it pushes out. So cool. Okay, so let's examine this aerial root first. So in an ideal situation, you'll have the main aerial root, and then you'll have feeder roots coming out of the main root, and that will let you know that it's actually time to transfer this directly into soil. But in this case, we still have just this singular aerial root here. So I don't know, I think it's okay. It's not mushy or anything. It is a little bit brown, but I think that's fine as long as it's not mushy. The tip here is still pretty white, so that tells me that it's still growing and still healthy. So now I'm going to be checking the next aerial root, and then after that I will wrap it up again, but this time in foil instead of saran wrap, because I have trouble with saran wrap properly enclosing it because it tends to unravel a little bit. I've seen some people use Ziploc bags, but this root is still quite small, so foil will at least help it to keep its shape and not unravel. So this aerial root also looks pretty healthy, and it looks like they've been both growing at the same rate. They're about the same length, and they both are very white at the tip, so they're still both healthy. And because I'm in a very dry climate, there's not a lot of humidity to begin with, although I do have a humidifier here in the room, but none of my aeroids ever go past these nubs in the aerial roots. They always stay as these little tiny nubs, which is fine because they don't really need to grow as long. As you can see, this plant has been growing very happily. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use some aluminum foil and then wrap these guys back up with a fresh set of sphagnum moss. So now I'm just preparing my sphagnum moss and moistening it with water. I am going to be adding a drop of this Dr. Q's plant tonic, which I got from Star Nursery, but I think it's pretty much the same as your typical super thrive. Just like that. Give it a good swish. So I'm adding a drop of the plant tonic because sphagnum moss by itself doesn't necessarily provide, if at all, any nutrients. And I know it's been growing in the previous sphagnum moss, which was nothing more than just me sprucing it with water. This will give it that extra oomph that it might need before I eventually chop it up. All right, while that soaks up, let's see how we're gonna be doing this. I need a strategy. I have a square foil here. I think I'm just gonna like slide it under there and then create a cup like that. Put the sphagnum moss on and then wrap it up. I think that'll work. I'll just place some sphagnum moss on the foil. Just like that. Place it underneath. I want to leave a little bit of room for the root to grow a little bit farther. So I'll focus the sphagnum moss a little bit lower along the aerial root, just like that, and put some more on top. And then wrap her up. Hopefully that stays. I do want to leave an opening up at the top just for proper air circulation and allowing the sphagnum moss to dry out a little bit, and also for easy access when it comes time to moisten it with water. So there's that one. Then we'll move on to the next one here. So if you guys are also trying to do this with foil, I wouldn't recommend heavy duty foil because that is very thick and you might end up accidentally slicing your plant, and you don't want that to happen. So really this is just a basic Reynolds wrap. It doesn't say heavy duty or anything like that. Just like that. Wow, she's looking like an alien. So there we go. I think using foil would be a lot easier for me when I check up on these guys once a week, because I'll be able to just carefully open it up just like that. I won't have to worry about the saran wrap unraveling. I think this is pretty good. Well, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video or if you found it helpful, hit the like button and plant scribe. Plant scribe. Let me know down in the comments if you've had any successes with air layering a Monstera Albo or air layering 2 aerial roots on the same plant. I would like to hear about it. And yeah, until then, I will see you in the next one. Bye!